Today, we are going to talk about the broader generative AI and human collaboration, how we work with these tools. And then we're going to look a little bit about how do you optimize your workday with generative AI. So looking at opportunities to use CoachGPT in your daily work. And then we're going to switch on over to customizing our tools. So really looking again at prompts and how can we make them better in order to get customized outputs for our use cases. And then we'll talk about optimizing those prompts. So best practices to improve performance overall. So that is where we're headed today. We're going to kick off a high level here talking about how we work with these tools. So we've talked, up until this point, we really covered a lot on how we build these tools, right? We're thinking about how can we use these tools for a specific use case. And now we're going a little more high level about how do you use these tools in your day-to-day. So there's really two ways to think about using generative AI, and they are augmenting your work and automating your work. Augmenting your work is where you are very much in the loop. You as the human, you're really collaborating with this tool. This is maybe a task that you feel responsible for. It may have a high stakes situation. So maybe you need to, analyze a lot of information and then make a strategic decision on it. That's a pretty high stakes situation, right? If everybody's relying on you. And then maybe the task requires nuanced judgment and decision making. That would be a case where you would use generative AI to augment your work. Maybe you use it to get started in the work, but then you do the rest. This is in comparison to automating your work, which is more of a human intelligence on the loop. So think of this as the situation of a task that maybe you just don't want to do. You don't want to write this email. You don't want to, write the copy for a product over and over again, right? This is a low stakes situation. Nobody's really relying on you for decision making. So whatever output comes out of the generative AI model isn't really going to have a huge impact, right, on the situation. And this is for work that's boring, right? So again, repetitive work. Dangerous work is a little kind of misleading here. It wouldn't be like dangerous, like harmful, but the task is it may be something that is unpleasant. I think I had an example of using generative AI to give scripts to call agents when customers were really angry. And it really helped the agents better respond to the customers, because usually they would respond to customers and they would get really worked up and they'd be really upset trying to come up with, the right kind of answer for an angry customer. And our research showed that when they received a script that was already written for them, it was a lot easier for them to kind of take a distance from the angry customer, and it didn't affect them as much. So that's a really good example of automating that work. So when you think about your work, some examples here. When you are looking for a thought partner for creative collaboration, it's really great. You can then think about augmenting your work. So, you're at the start of your project, you're not really sure where to start. Turning to generative AI or CoachGPT to get a bunch of different, ideas is a great approach, right? It's more of a collaboration there. When you're seeking more of like an intern to get things done, that's more when you're automating your work. So an example here might be building out custom GPTs. These are chatbots that assist with completing tasks. So you might create a GPT that every time you upload a type of data set, it's going to spit out an output that is already tailored to your needs and your reporting, right? It's an example of automating your work. So let's think of it by task, by function here. With marketing, this could be augmenting your work might look like making prompts align with your brand voice. So refining them, that way when the content comes out from your prompts, they're going to align better with your brand's voice or messaging strategies. If you want to automate your work, this could be setting up a program that generates initial drafts for marketing materials such as emails, social media posts, and blog articles. So I've seen things like chatbots that when you upload, a blog post, it turns it into emails, social media posts, internal Slack posts, and so on. Now, when I am talking about this, sometimes when we think about automating our work, this might not be something you can do right now. This may be something you have to, build a system for, or someone inside your organization is likely going to build this type of system using generative AI. But what we're talking about here is kind of the near future of how we're going to use generative AI in our everyday workflows and how it's going to start integrating into the platforms where we work. So if you see something today like, oh, I would love it if I could just upload a blog post and have, social media posts and Slack posts ready. It may not be right there yet. You may not have that platform yet, but in the near future, you could. And it's a great example of automating your work. So For strategy, examples of this might be enhancing your strategic analysis by providing data-driven insights and recommendations. You may use CodeGPT and give it some data and say, this is my analysis. How could we improve on this? And give me some insights. Automating might be the process of on-demand data collection, right? To be able to synthesize all these pieces of data, like your competitor strategy docs, your internal data, your pricing data, bring it all together and create a regular report on a weekly basis that's tailored to your audience. That's a great example of automating your work. May not be something you can do right now, but something you can do in the near future. In supply chain, this may look like conducting market research, analyzing industry trends. Automating might be, again, that streamlining of data collection and reporting. And you can start to see here that data collection and reporting is one of those big use cases. Our organizations are full of data, and not everyone has access to that data. And so when we start giving people access to it, we start seeing what they can do with data collection and reporting and visualization. So you can start to see in the near future, you may have inventory management where you can rely on real-time data and policies to give you outputs that you can then make decisions on. Automating your work in tech. This is a great example here. If you are working in the development space, you can use CodeGPT to make recommendations for fixing bugs or optimizing your code. In the near future, may have something where this is actually automated. So any code that you write may be automatically, it may be automatically detect, common issues, security vulnerabilities, and so on. And then sometimes we have just these features that are built into our systems. So what's this look like when you're working together with generative AI? You want to think really about your workflows. You want to reflect on what am I doing on a daily basis, right? And then start to think, okay, what does this task require? Is this something that, I can use generative AI to help me? We're just going to collaborate together. Or is this a task that maybe I can use generative AI just to get it done, right? I'm just going to have it analyze this data, make a report. I'm just going to review the outputs, right, before I send it off, right? So thinking critically about what your workflows are and what the tasks are in those workflows is how you figure out how and where to use generative AI in your role. And you can see some examples down here as you're reflecting. Do you have anything in your role where you're customizing programs or supporting onboarding? Do you have anything in your role where you're managing routine tasks or generating performance reports and so on? These are great use cases for using generative AI. So I'm curious from yours. Let's continue our discussion kind of building on what we talked about earlier in the session. Which tasks would you augment using AI and which do you think you would automate? And this is you can come off mute and just share.
That's what you augment.
And if you're not sure, that's okay too. You can just say, I would use generative AI for this task.
Yeah, hi. Maybe for the work augmentation for critical decision, it's like analysis of extensive documents, like
Okay.
100 pages reading, speed reading, that would require us to prepare a brief internally quickly, like to flag, to analyze any red flag, and to bounce it off. Since this is Coke GPT, so it has like a database on our existing policies, so it could cross check on that. For the
Great.
automation, I'm not so sure what to automate yet, but for augmentation using AI, that would be it. Thanks.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. And do we have any questions so far? I'm not seeing the chat. We're good on questions. All right. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and yeah, we can tackle them as we go. So let's talk about your workday. I want you to think about your workday and where you spend the most time at work. So studies show that we spend 50% of our time on the most repetitive tasks. So think about meetings, right? Spend a lot of time in meetings. And the typical office worker spends about half of their time creating and uploading documents, updating documents. So we see a lot of PDFs, Word documents, spreadsheets, right? putting information in, documenting information so other team members can use that information to do their work. And we have 10% of time spent on manual data entry. So the average office worker spends 10% of their time doing manual data entry, such as copy and pasting between spreadsheets and CRM. And that's quite a bit of time if you think about your workday. So I'm curious about you. I'd like you, this is an individual activity. We're just going to take a couple of minutes here to reflect. And I want you to think about your day. Think about today or yesterday. And think about where you spend the majority of your time. Right? What are you doing in the majority of your day? And if your majority of the day is meetings, what are you doing in those meetings? Right? So think just a little bit of reflection here. I'm going to give you like 2 minutes and just either make a list or just have a mental list of what you're doing during the day, because we're going to talk about it. Okay, and as you start to think about finish up your activities during the day, I want you to make a little pie chart. Doesn't have to look super fancy, but you can do this mentally too. Cut your work pie into slices according to where you spend the most time. So thinking about what are the tasks that are taking up the most time during your day that are repetitive? What are the tasks that are working across teams, right? That collaboration. What are high level thinking tasks? Are you doing strategic planning a lot during the day? Are you doing data analysis? Are you writing? Think about that, and I'll give you another minute to kind of map out in a work pie where you're spending your time. Okay, now that you've got that,